Hello and welcome back. I'm speaking now with Edward Shawchuk, the State Deputy for British Columbia. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
So tell us a little bit about the Canadian Association meeting that took place on Monday, and then also some of the work that you've been involved in with the British Columbia Council.
The Canadian Association meeting we had on Monday is an association of all the state deputies for the country of Canada. There's 10 of us. And it's an opportunity for us to work together, pool our thoughts, our resources, and our talents so that we're better able to get economies and maximize our effectiveness on an order-wide basis throughout Canada. One of our key projects this year is a holy door that's being installed in the Basilica in Quebec City, and it's to commemorate the 350th anniversary of the first Catholic Church in Canada.
Right.
And so the holy door is, as you can imagine, it's a big event. The cost is going to be roughly $500,000, and so our Supreme Council has pledged half of that, and we as the Knights of Columbus in Canada are raising the other half of that. And as part of that, we're going to have our state deputies meetings where all of the state deputies order-wide will be in Quebec this November to see the Holy Door and to go through it. Part of the intrigue of the Holy Door is that those pilgrims that pass through it are granted indulgences by the Church.
Interesting. Share some of the highlights from this past year.
From the past year, we've had a pretty fun year in British Columbia. One of the things that we were involved in was my predecessor, our immediate past state deputy, was involved in a wheelchair distribution in Mexico at the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and he had a great time with that.
How many wheelchairs were distributed?
There was a full container of wheelchairs. I believe it was about 200. It was over 200 wheelchairs that were distributed, and so it was something that is very enlightening and is very uplifting to those that are able to do that. We had our second ever Coats for Kids distribution. This year it was done in Victoria. And
I know you have a very special story to share with us about that.
We did our first one in downtown Vancouver on the downtown east side, which is the poorest neighborhood in Canada. And about an hour and a half before we opened, there was a knock on the door. There was a little 5-year-old fellow named Raymond and his dad's friend. And they came in and we said, no problems, we'll open early, that's fine, come on in, you're welcome. And I took a coat off the table. I took this shabby beat up coat, a little red coat off of this young boy, handed it to his dad, and I put this blue coat on him, zipped it up, and no sooner did I get the zipper all the way up, but he pulled the zipper down, whipped the coat off, and threw it back up onto the table faster than I could say, "What are you doing?" So I thought, well, okay, that's strange. So I put the coat back on him, and he immediately zipped it back off and tossed it back on the table. And I said, "Raymond, is there a problem with the coat? Like, is there something that you don't like?" He looked up at his dad, this little 5-year-old boy, and said, "Dad, do you have any money?" And his dad said, I don't have any money." And so he looked at me and said, "Mister, I don't have any money. I can't buy your coat, so I don't think I should waste your time." And at that point, my heart cracked. So I tried to think really quickly, and I thought, "Raymond, will you do me a favor? You're the first young man here. Would you test the coat for me? That won't be a waste of my time. And if you can test the coat, tell me if they're good coats, because we're going to have children through here all day taking these coats." And so he agreed, and I got the coat on him, and I asked him to hold his arms out, and I'm tugging the sleeves and checking the fit. And I said, "Tell me, how does the coat fit? Is it a good coat? Do you like it?" And he said, "Yeah, I like it." And I said, "Well, what about the color? Is it a good color?" And he said, yeah, the color's pretty good." And so while he had his arms up, I snatched the size tag out from under his armpit, and I sort of looked at it and said, "You see this tag, Raymond?" And quickly scooped it back in, and he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, this is the price tag, and the price today for coats, this coat costs one high five. Can you give me a high five?" And he did with such force, it hurt. But I looked at him and said, "You just paid for your coat." And so he was really delighted and happy that he was able to pay for his coat. And I found out later that this little boy, for the first 4.5 years of his life, lived with his father homeless under a suspension bridge in North Vancouver. And so I'll never forget Raymond as long as I live. That little boy has touched my life in an incredible way, and that's because of the Knights of Columbus.
We're actually looking at some Coats for Kids distribution in Salt Lake, but of course very similar to something that you would have done.
It's very similar, and if a council has an opportunity to participate, these children will touch you in a way that you can never ever hope to imagine.
How many coats did you distribute?
We did 324 coats that day.
Wow. And generally, how do the coats get donated? Or?
What we did is we worked with the Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of Vancouver. They did a dress down day, and each of the schools contributed the proceeds from the dress down day to purchase coats for us. And so the state council chipped in some money, we bought a couple of cases, and then with the funds from the dress down day, we had children helping children, and we were able to put that together and connect that. So it was a really good opportunity to involve the whole community in trying to help this small, very poor segment of the community. And we're starting the planning for our next Coats for Kids program coming up again this year. We're looking initially to do it in Surrey, British Columbia, and I'm trying to do it in conjunction with the BC Lions football team. There are a number of players who are Catholic who've expressed an interest in participating.
I'd also like to hear more about some of your initiatives just generally in terms of the approaching the legislature and some other items like that.
I've made initial approaches to some of the pro-life groups in British Columbia, Focus for Life, Signal Hill, and the Archdiocesan pro-life movement, with the intention of getting introductions to get the Knights of Columbus in front of the provincial legislature. And we need to start becoming more proactive. We've been very reactive. We did start a March for Life several years ago. It is extremely successful. So my hope is that during my term as state deputy to move this to the next level and actually get in front of the legislators. The only way that we're going to make progress is to have them listen to us, and I think a one-on-one is the way to do that. And so we can start moving them forward to moving back towards the culture of life that we used to have in British Columbia.
You also shared earlier a very personal story on how you were approached and invited into the Knights and how that changed your life. Would you mind sharing that with our viewers?
In his address today, our worthy Supreme Knight, Brother Carl, said that we're not looking for perfect men, we're looking for good men who want to become better men so that together we can become great men. And as a very young man, I lived in a small town. I am Ukrainian Catholic, but I don't speak Ukrainian. The priest in our community was in his 80s, he didn't speak English. So when I had questions, I really had nowhere to go. And so I was left with nothing but questions and no answers, and I became a bit disillusioned. When I moved to Calgary years later, there were two Knights of Columbus, one of whom incidentally was my older brother, who said, Ed, we want you to be part of our group. We want you to be part of our Knights of Columbus Council. And so they brought me back into the Knights of Columbus. And through my involvement in the Knights of Columbus, I've become more involved in the church. I've developed a passion for my Catholicism and for my faith. And so the Knights of Columbus has taken me from the wrong path and put me back on the right path. And they were 30 years ahead of the curve in evangelization, but I think they were on the right track. And I can never express my debt of gratitude to those two men, because what they've basically done is they've given me an opportunity to come back into the faith and earn my salvation.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
So I'm speaking with Edward Shawchuk. He's the State Deputy for British Columbia. We'll be right back after this break.
Thank you.